Welcome everybody to the fourth Meet the PI session of this year's online conference. Today we have Aparajita Datta. Um, so she is currently working for the Nature Conservation Foundation, and in the previous plenary session, she gave a talk on her research on hornbills. And she was also one of the eight conservationists to receive the Witness Award in 2013. So now, welcome, Aparajita. And I think I will start with a very generic question. You have been working with hornbills for a long time. So what keeps you motivated and inspired through this long time in your research?
Oh, I don't even think about it because I think it's just or when I was a child, from the time I was a child, I wanted to be an ecologist, and it's it's been it's just intrinsic that, this work that we've been doing for 25 years. I don't know what keeps me motivated really. It's just that it's part of my life and it's so interesting, right? It's hard to say. I mean, I just love working in the forests, and there are so many questions that come up when you're working and observing animals, birds, trees. We work with trees and interactions with hornbills. There are multiple questions, and every time you go to the field, there's always so many questions. So the work is endless, right? And there's new stuff that keeps coming up. And because we also work on conservation issues, so there's a lot of conservation projects that we do, which is more motivated by a desire to see these birds protected and safe in these habitats. So yeah,
Is,
I can't say what. It's just in me to want to keep going and do this stuff. Hmm.
How did you first settle on hornbills as a subject for research? What was your path to that? Was it always the animal that you wanted to work with?
No, actually, when I was doing my master's in the Wildlife Institute, I was very interested more in mammals and actually behavior and looking at dispersal by marmots. And I was studying squirrels for my master's thesis. I looked at the giant squirrels in central India, looking at their patterns, spatial patterns of movement and food availability. And I followed, individual giant squirrels, trying to understand their ranging and their food habit uses. And I went to Arunachal Pradesh, which is in Northeast India, which is an amazing state with a lot of forest cover and diversity. I went there in 95 to do a study which was looking at the impact of logging on squirrels and primates. And when I was in that forest, hornbills were very conspicuous and just all over the place, and very loud and noisy. And so it's just, spurred my curiosity to know more about them. And I was always also interested in frugivory and seed dispersal. So after I finished that 6-month study, I wrote up my PhD proposal to work on hornbills. And one of the main focus of my PhD was looking at seed dispersal by hornbills and tree phenology patterns. Yeah, so that's how I came to hornbills. I was not really an ornithologist, or I was not a very good bird watcher, but then I've become a bird watcher and very interested in birds now.
And how
so,
did the shift to
right.
conservation happen? Sorry,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I was actually very focused initially on research. And even after I finished my PhD, I was wanting to do a postdoc looking at the, post-dispersal fate of seeds, which are dispersed by hornbills, because we noticed a lot of rodent seed predation and the possibility of scatter hoarding by rodents. it's been noted in tropical forests. But what happened is, because I was in Arunachal, there was a lot of there was a community, the tribal community that I interacted with, hunters that I came across. Although my main study site was in this tiger reserve, at times when it was very lonely and it was remote, I would travel to other parts of the state. I got very interested in the people also in the region, and interacting, learning from them, talking to them, but also noticing the threats to a lot of the species. And there's a lot of hunting in the region. Um, some of it was subsistence, and people have done it for a long time, but it also causes threats to some of the species. So yeah, I mean, I just ended up getting into conservation more deeply soon after my PhD. And for some years, in fact, I ended up focusing only on the conservation work. I worked in another tiger reserve, later, where I was trying to work with a community to help them with various issues related to healthcare and education, and then trying to win their support for conservation. So yeah, it was very different. It was a total shift for a while, while continuing some of the research and monitoring. Yeah.
So you are a strong advocate for working with local community for conservation projects. Then what are the challenges you would encounter when working with them, especially mitigating among different stakeholders, like hunters, for example?
Yeah, it's very challenging. I didn't touch upon that during my talk. But I think, as conservationists, it's very hard, so when people do science, and when I'm doing my research or the science, or there is work which is more applied conservation, that is very different from trying to do on-ground conservation with different stakeholders, because we also work with the government, we also work with the people. And, people have other interests or concerns, you know. So often, yes, there is conflict, but, it's a matter of trying to negotiate with the different sets of people. It's very hard, I will tell you. Uh, but I do believe that the some of the top-down approaches to conservation are not a good way, right? So I believe that uh, you know rights of people, land rights, um, and their agency has to be given the primary sort of focus, right? And winning people's support for conservation means that you have to engage with people. They view wildlife and a lot of it differently in some areas, because to them it's right there for them, right? So sometimes, and that's not they're thinking about their livelihoods, about other issues related to land rights and access. So it's hard to engage at times. Yeah. With hunting, in the area that I've worked in over the years, people have really sort of stopped hunting. And it's not only because our work, it's because of multiple reasons. There was some good forest officers. There was some other village council people who had banned hunting of hornbills. They already had taboos on hunting species during the breeding season. A lot of those got enforced over time. And now people actually love hornbills in that area. And they actually prevent others from coming and hunting, although there are a few instances here and there. Yeah. But yeah, across the state of Arunachal or other places, hornbills are still hunted in many areas, as well as other species. But it's going to take time for, there are many reasons why people hunt in different areas, right, for different species.
So you have observed this change on the local attitude towards hornbills or conservation in general. What you're doing in the tiger reserve, how applicable it is to other natural reserve?
Okay, so I didn't talk about the other areas we work in. So apart from this particular tiger reserve, I've also worked in the Namdapha Tiger Reserve, another place in Arunachal. Then I said, no, I have multiple field sites. Some of those field sites have not been as long-term as the Pakke Tiger Reserve, but we also work in North Bengal, in another tiger reserve and some wildlife sanctuaries. So yeah, so our focus is that we do a lot of the research maybe inside the tiger reserve. We work with the forest department staff. There is training for people. In our restoration project, the nature education program, the forest department is also a part of it. We involve them. Recently, we just concluded a forest restoration workshop, which was meant for forest officers. But when we are working outside the PA, in the reserve forest areas or say in community lands, there we engage more with the people. Right? So sorry, what was your question? I forgot the details of the, yeah.
No, I'm just wondering because
Mm.
we do a lot of conservation work. It's very region specific, especially involving the local community. So that
Yeah.
get me wonder, like what you have learned, the know-how you learn from one place, how applicable it is to another place.
Yeah, you're right. So it's very context and dependent and site specific. The region where I work is very tribal dominated, right? So in Arunachal, right? But Assam, another state, is a bit different. I'm so sorry. I hope you can't. That's my dog. Is it? Can you hear it? I'm so sorry. I can't find a place where. Oh God. Anyway, so um, but in the North Bengal region where we work, again, that place is slightly different in the way we would have to approach. There are different communities and different history there, yeah. But largely, our approach does remain the same in some of these areas because this region is a bit different from the rest of India, where, like central India or western parts of India, where the cultural context, the communities are very different. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm giving you a very generic answer, but it's hard to, yeah, explain without going into too much detail. Right.
I see
Thank you.
Evie's got his hand up.
Yeah, he has it hands up from quite a bit.
Yeah, so I guess I just wanted to touch upon, like, we had Gladys yesterday and she also highlighted this bit about how you have to involve the community if you want to do good conservation, right? And the thing I guess maybe one of the issues with that is that as a researcher you are not really trained to do that, right? You're really trained to work on your own research. You know how to develop a hypothesis, how to publish, blah blah blah, but not really talk with other stakeholders and get your point across or come to a middle ground and see how you can move forward, right? Is this something that, for example, you had training in, or did you just pick things up as you went along? And then, if it was the latter, then was it very difficult? I'm sure there must have been some instances where you would have had to, face a lot of pushback or something like that. So how did you? Yeah.
Oh, Evie, that's a very good question. You're right that we didn't get any training as a researcher, and when I ended up working in conservation, I will admit that in the initial many years, it was just really like what you said, you picked up while on the job, right? So we had no training in social science methods, or we may have, been exposed to some of the ideas and thoughts and read some papers related to working with people and community-based conservation in those days, in the 90s or early, like whatever. But in reality, yes, I had no formal training. But I do believe that, one of the things is that like we have academics in the research field who are purely wildlife ecologists or biologists, then in the social sciences also there are people who are very theory based, right? There are very few among the social scientists who also get their hands dirty or work really on ground with people. So at NCF, the organization I work with, me and many of my colleagues, when we began this work, like many of us have ended up working long term in our sites and engaging with people in those sites. A lot of it is also just based on human relationships and friendships and connections and empathy with people, so identifying with the problems that they're facing, right? It's not, I would say that I never approached it so much in a sort of structured way, maybe earlier, right? Now, some years ago, there are efforts by some of my colleagues to actually, there's a trainer's guide, how to engage with people and communities. And maybe I can share a link on that. In fact, I'm part of that publication and others. So it's been contributed by a lot of people. But there was some guidelines and a trainer's manual developed, say, for how to engage with people and what are the principles, and it's called the partners principles. And yeah, so I think I have learned on the job. And yes, I have received a lot of pushback. I ended up arguing with people, getting into conflict. So yeah, it is difficult. Yeah. But I think having learned from it, I think some of my younger team members who are now working, I can teach them what not to do, how to do it better. Yeah. And in some cases, you just have to let go when it's affecting people or when it's causing too much conflict.
In your presentation, you showed local people using hornbill bills as as part of traditional headgear and part of traditional food sources and fat sources and so on. How do you go about approaching a community and saying, here's a resource that you've used for forever, and now suddenly we want you to change the way that you're dealing with it?
So the way it's worked in that area is a lot of the people in that area have seen me from when I was 25 years old working on hornbills. And I think it's not just me, but there was other researchers who came into the area later. There's been a sort of slow change that has happened to people. In that area, we never approached people directly to tell them to stop hunting, or we didn't go to them at the community level to stop hunting. We engage with them in different ways. And when we began the nest adoption program, by the time we began the nest adoption program in 2012, there was already a lot of awareness among the community because of the work that we had done, others had done, and the forest department officials, some of them. One particular forest officer, Mr. Tanatapi, he was remarkable and exceptional. He was from the tribe. He was from that tribe. He came into the area and encouraged the formation of a village council, a council of elders, who were partly responsible for helping to work with the department to sort of stop hunting in that area. Apart from that, there is another organization that started a project, again led by another Nishi officer, who tried to convince people to stop using the real beaks and use substitute beaks, which are made from fiberglass. And that was a different program that we were not part of. That has been successful to a great extent in sort of shifting people from. But I think I would say that it's multiple factors. And the other thing now, I mean, I didn't share the link. Maybe I can share the links with you guys or on the chat later. We have a couple of films. One of our donors came and made a film on the nest adoption program. And there you will see that a lot of people in the area have started identifying with hornbills because they always had stories and folklore about hornbills, right? They had some taboos. They used hornbills, yes, but they realized the value of the birds and they sort of now appreciate them because they come in large numbers to roost near the village. And they never saw that happening because earlier the birds would maybe getting scared, but now they come and roost in the near the village, and people take pride in it. They show others. There is some tourism developing in the area, bird tourism, nature tourism. So yeah, it's been not a very drastic change in this area. It's a slow change that's happened over many years. With the nest adoption program, actually, we were more trying to address the threat of habitat loss and trees being felled and, degradation of the habitat. Hunting was not an issue that we had to deal with much when we began the nest adoption program. But yes, in another site where I've worked, there we did talk to the community about stopping hunting of other wildlife. And yeah, that was a different and difficult process. Yeah.
So we were
But you,
talking yesterday
yeah,
about mountain gorillas and the programs, the conservation programs, providing benefits to local people and treating them as part of involving them, giving them
yeah,
jobs I notice have you had a similar approach to involving the
yeah.
communities?
I don't, so we, in this, so with my hornbill work, a lot of it has been research, right? And trying to understand different aspects of hornbill biology and monitoring. Um, the nest adoption program is the conservation approach that we have used for that actually gives direct benefits to only a few people in the community who are selected by some of our partners from the villages who act as nest protectors. So I gave the numbers. Right now, there's 11 people from the community, but over the long term, there have been others who've been part of the program. Then we've also done a lot of other things, like we have tried to help with livelihood benefits, training youth in nature guiding, in helping establish some homestays for people. We've also tried to give training to women for, starting some initiatives related to vegetable gardens. But I must say that those were very sporadic and not very successful or impactful, right? But what we realized is our strength is not so much in trying to do the livelihood part. That's why with the nest adoption program, one of the things that we do is some of the money that we get from donors, apart from employing the nest protectors, is used for some community welfare initiative in the area. Some community welfare development need that the community wants or needs, which is decided by all the partners in consultation. And we've done things like put up an electric fence around the village school, which was because of the kids were threatened by the elephants moving around in the area. Or we've provided blackboards to schools. And then what we realized is our strengths are more in certain aspects. So we have a nature education program, which is for the tribal school children. I couldn't talk about it during the plenary, but that is really something that has been very successful. We've established this program in the last 7 years. The kids from the area are taken into the forest for camps to build a connection with nature. And it's not about giving them facts. The kids love insects and stuff. Even though we show them hornbills and other wildlife, they really love looking at the insects. And one of my colleagues, she's been very good at one of my colleagues helped us develop and build those modules. His name is Dr. Pranav Trivedi. And then my colleague Sania Chaplod has really worked with the kids. And our nest protector coordinator, who's from the local community, and our team leader from the field, I've showed their pictures. They are the ones who lead that program. Every winter, we do these camps with different sets of school children. from class 6 to class 9. Then we also, with the restoration program, because we know the trees, we know the fruiting times, we know about seed collection, we know how to grow these native species in the nursery. That is another approach, and we provide the saplings to the people. If some small proportion of our saplings are provided to the local people. So yeah, we've done all this. It's like part of our larger thing, but it's on these three things: restoration, forest restoration, nature education, and hornbill conservation. We don't right now focus too much on livelihoods. The other thing that we started was a hornbill festival in the area. It was the idea that we proposed, and initial years we were very directly involved with the organizing of the festival to celebrate the role of Nishi people. So that is something that the people have taken forward and taken it as their own. And it's now sort of approved by the state government, and it's quite a big thing that happens every January in that area. So yeah, those are the ways that we've engaged with the community. Long answer. Sorry.
I know I'm trying not to monopolize it. I could ask you questions all day.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a lot of work has been done. So, may I ask, it's very inspiring to see you in the field for so many years and done so much work. Have you had encounters difficulties because as a woman researcher, like all the pushbacks, do they
To be
like
honest,
play harder on you because you are a woman, or yeah?
to be honest, actually, in my younger days, I didn't feel it or realize it at all. I think I know many women do face it, but I did not feel that I was, that there was any pushback. I don't know, maybe in our masters, initially you did feel that, some mentors or people may have, favored the boys more than the women, but it was very minimal. And I guess I'm quite sort of like aggressive and very passionate. So I would discount that and still go ahead and do what I had to do. But I've had people, mentors who are men who have supported a lot of my work in the early years when I began. So for me, it's not been difficult. And also, the funny thing is, the region I work in, it's actually a better place for women to work because Arunachal Pradesh or parts of Northeast India, it's much safer for women. It's not so patriarchal, the attitudes like in some other parts of India. So it's actually more I mean, it's very enabling to work there as a woman, And in fact, in some of the remote sites, it's very funny the way people, would address, like my husband, who's also a wildlife scientist, and another colleague had come along to, and when they were sending us invitations to a function, they'd say, it's addressed to me. And they'd say, Madam, whatever, and party. So it was kind of funny because they always gave primacy to, and, also when people speak to you, they address you, even if there are men around, unlike in other parts of India. Yeah, but then I've had some, but in later years, I think I've faced some issues with dealing with some bureaucrats and officials who have more patriarchal attitudes, So yeah, yeah.
And
Do you think that's changed over time? Do you think that patriarchal attitudes have modified in the last 20, 30 years?
Yeah, definitely it has changed, but it still exists in some circles, And also, depending on your age or your so-called position in India, people tend to, look at the hierarchy of where you are and how old you are and, those kind of factors.
talking about field work, I actually have another question about the practical side.
Mhm.
So the hornbill even though they are giants, but working in the forest can be hard. Do you like the most innovative method for you to track those birds?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
name
So it's
some?
very, that's what I wanted to say. Like a lot of behavioral studies are not possible on the forest hornbills. And that's a huge gap area. Like the hornbills in South Africa, the ground hornbills in the open savanna, they're able to do a lot more experimental studies by more invasive research, tagging birds, catching them, observing, following the. We don't know a lot of parts of the hornbill's life history. For instance, after the chicks fledge, what happens to the juveniles? How long do they stay with the pair? When do they disperse? Do females disperse? What happens? Where and when? How does pair formation occur? Then, in relation to roosting, we don't understand some aspects of this roosting behavior. Why do they roost in such large numbers? And there are theories, about the evolution of roosting, and there are hypotheses about why birds roost in. So, what I'm saying is, sorry. So my answer to your question is that one of the a couple of the innovative methods that we've been able to use is we use telemetry. I mentioned that during my talk about to understand about certain aspects of the seed dispersal question. So that was really difficult because you need very specialized canopy mist nets, which are different from the usual mist nets, much larger mesh size. Because if it's that, it has to be a certain size because otherwise the hornbill would hit the mesh and just fly off, bounce off. Then, of course, ordering all that equipment, which is particular for those birds. We need, we needed certain kind of tags. Then getting the permits and catching those birds is really hard. We'd have to get up at 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. And a few days before, you have to figure out, okay, where are you going to trap them? Observe the fruiting trees. Where are they coming from usually? Then look at the direction of their movement and then decide. And that's based on a lot on our field team's knowledge. And to place the mist nets in the correct position. And then you have to climb the trees to put up sometimes you have to climb to cut the branches to sort of get the net position in place. But you can't leave the nets there, right? So they're kind of closed and kept. And then you have to go back at 2 a.m. because the birds are very early. They start visiting the fruiting trees at the crack of dawn. So you have to go there in the dark and put up the nets in the dark and then wait for them. And then, it's like requires a huge amount of patience. People did it for weeks. I was not there for all of the time because this was in 2014, 15, we did this project, but it was led by one of my colleagues, my, former PhD student, Rohit Naniwadekar. He and the team, I was there for some of the, times, but just requires a lot of patience. Many times the birds would just fly over the net. They'd see the net even though it was so quite, supposed to be invisible. So it was hard to do that work, right? But it was rewarding because we learned a lot more with that. Then we do canopy climbing to repair hornbill nests. But again, I'll tell you how frustrating it is. We bought eye buttons, hugely expensive, ordered it and got, paid sort of a lot of tax, duty and all that. And they were installed inside some nest cavities because we wanted to check the temperature inside the cavity and more, like look at, because we were also doing artificial nest boxes and we wanted to check what's the stability of temperature and humidity inside the nest. And after 3 months or something, when the team went back and tried to get them, they were all gone. The hornbills didn't like those sensors and just, I think pecked and threw them away. So yeah, and the other thing I want to tell you is that, we don't know some basic things from wild hornbills, such as I told you that we are observing the breeding and monitoring but we don't know exactly from the wild observations, we don't know when do the chicks exactly hatch, how many eggs have been produced. A lot of what I said on that aspect is from captivity or from one or two studies in other places where they've figured out the sort of chick hatching period. Because unless we put cameras inside, we can't know that, you know. And putting cameras inside is also kind of invasive, especially hard in these Asian forest hornbills. Yeah. So
Interesting.
You talked about the saplings, and you're providing saplings to grow into nesting trees. How long does that take?
So that was towards the end of my talk. I just said, that the growth rate is very fast in these areas. We were very surprised. Some of the trees that we planted in 2016, which are, of course, food plants, they're not the nest tree species, um, they fruited in 7 years, in 8 years. These are sub-canopy trees of Miliaceae, Myristicaceae, but the nest trees also are fast growing. I told you that there is this particular species that they use in this area, which is this emergent softwood. It's a wind dispersed species. It's called Tetramelis. We are not sure of how far, but it grows pretty fast. But to become a nest tree, it will take years. It'll probably take 15, 20 years. Uh, but that's like, we try to grow a multitude of species, basically ecologically important, a lot of animal dispersed species, some wind dispersed species, a mix of them for planting in the degraded forest patches, which are the restoration sites. So yeah, recovery will take, the kind of results you want to see, but it's much faster growth rate than some of the other places. And we've published a paper, we've done a study, one of my students and others, we've looked at growth rates and the survival of different species by tagging the seedlings. Most of the restoration plots, we tag the seedlings and look at survival and growth rate. So we found that some species are fast growing and some are very slow growing, and yeah, different survival rates. Also, survival here is affected by a lot of wild animals. There's a lot of elephants and gore. There's trampling. There's herbivory by insects. So yeah.
So it's a long-term process. It's
Yes,
you're
yes.
talking about an enormous amount of time to keep this process going.
Abby, you have a question?
Oh, sorry.
So I was just thinking, and I think it touches on something that you briefly mentioned when you were talking about innovative ways to do your research. I guess being from the global south, funding is always going to be an issue, right? And especially like for something like conservation, which is not like one of the big mammals and stuff, it's always going to be hard to get the money that you want to do the stuff that you want to do. So how has it been for you? Have you had to always constantly, every year I need to write a grant, get money to do this, or has it been like the phases where you've got a good support from some system, and then you could do what you wanted to do without worrying too much?
So actually, Abby, because I am in like a NGO, an NGO that does research and conservation. So we are a different kind of NGO from the usual idea of NGOs. We are registered, as PhD guides with Manipal University and all that. So we have research and conservation. And actually, it's been less easy for me to get money for my research than for the conservation. Because not fortunately or unfortunately, most of the funding, even in outside, that is in the UK or US or other places, are for conservation grants. There are very few academic or grants for basic research outside. And within India, you'll be aware that there is only Department of Science and Technology, and for some institutions they can access DBT grants. But the universities or institutions like NCBS may have more research money, right, for faculty. But for us, we have to raise the research money, and it's much more harder for getting the research money than the conservation money. Fortunately, with the conservation work, of course, I mean, like you said, a lot of the money is for larger, like more charismatic species, elephants, tigers, cats, all that. But I've been lucky that I've been able to, yes, some years I've had to scramble, and we have to continuously write proposals and grants all the time. And but I've been fortunate because, I got the Whitley grant in 2013, but before that, I'd been supported by National Geographic. And I was supported by WCS and the Disney Conservation Fund. Whitley grant helped me because it gave me they also give continuation funding, which is a big support to whoever their winners are. And that has been great because then it's not just year to year. The initial grant is a 1 year thing, but after that you can get, so I was able to scale up the conservation work because of that. Plus, I have got some local support. There is an organization that just reached out to me. Again, maybe because of the Whitley and some of the other awards I've got, they knew of my work and they just reached out. I didn't have to write a proposal. They wanted to fund our work, and they have sort of supported our work from 2014 onwards. That's been a real help. But at the same time, I wanted to tell you this because that long-term monitoring that we've been able to continue, that low-key monitoring of climate with a weather station and tree phenology and nesting, I have never raised a research grant separately for it. I wish I could. That's what I've been trying in the last year. I have been able to continue that in the background simply because of all the larger support I have for the conservation work, because the same people are involved in the field teams. No, we are doing the work. So, but if I had a research grant, which was for the long-term monitoring, we could have done much more. And we could have had better instrumentation and some equipment and done more, how would I say, innovative things, Yeah. And I could have hired a postdoc or a researcher who was working, or a technical person, but that has not been possible.
Okay.
Hmm.
Oh, I was going to go.
Hmm.
You talked about taking the kids into the forest and beginning their relationship with it, and the particularly that they're interested in insects and they're cats, and but how are you seeing a generational thing? Are you seeing that the new generation of conservationists and ecologists and animal behavioralists are these children, are people becoming more interested in this? Is this a growing field in where you're working?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Although our program began in 2017, so it's not been that many years. Um, One of the children who was in class 12 or not class 12, sorry, in class 10 in the first camps, he now works with our team. And he said he got really inspired and motivated. So he's now in our field team and helping one of my PhD students in his research. That is one individual, of course, within our team. But apart from that, in general, because apart from the nature education program where we are focusing on kids from class 6 to class 10, the our team, because we lived there, the village, in the village, many of my team members and researchers who are from outside the region also are there. We interact with a lot of this happens through informal exchanges. So there are a lot of young people in the community now who have seen all the researchers from outside working in the area, not just us. Many of them are now into this in different ways. Some of them have become nature guides. They're taking tours to other areas. Some of them have got training in photo videography and photo documentation, because there is now an organization called Green Hub in close by, which is sort of empowering local youth from the northeastern region, giving them training in videography, photo documentation, and there are fellowships for responsible tourism that this organize. So there are people from this area who are now going into those kind of. A lot of the youth are interested. And as a rule, like as a general trend in Arunachal, people are doing there are moth weeks, and people are doing moth observations, butterfly weeks all over the state. Many things are happening. So yes, there's a large bunch of people in the state, including from university students who have now interned with us. Um, there's a researcher from Arunachal who worked with our team and who's now doing his PhD in UK. He did some work on pangolins. So I see a big change from when I started working in the 90s. But among the kids in the nature education program, they're still too young. And for us to track, so we don't know how much impact it's having in terms of them taking on, getting interested in it in a more deeper way.
So do you think it's about getting them interested early on and then maintaining contact with
Mhm.
natural information, sciences and just
Yeah,
animals and
yeah.
keeping
But
that going?
yes, what we try to do with some of the camps is that we have tried to give them repeated exposure. So the way it's structured is that some of the kids who attended the camp when they were young, in class 6 or 7, do another camp, so that they get more experiential, connection. And we're writing a paper about it, analyzing, because we were getting some feedback. We have some assessment of the kind of experience that they have. Some of it is qualitative, some of it is quantified, and we've not yet finished it. But we see that the kids are really excited about certain things, and our camps really focuses. There are certain modules about hornbills and trees, about um, the functioning of the ecosystem. There's some things about the cultural connection of the people with tigers and hornbills. These have all been developed by my colleague. Huh? I just overall supervise this, but I am not. They are the ones who lead this program completely, and I'm very happy to say that because it's nice to be able to delegate some things, right? But the kids are really. I think what we try to give them is more the spiritual sort of connection with nature. We don't bombard them with facts and names. So they get really excited in these camps. So we hope that some of them will be an advocate for nature in the future. Yeah. The
It's
interesting thing
very,
is, interesting
oh,
thing is that
sorry.
most of these kids who live around that area have never been into the tiger reserve because of access or other, so many textbooks, they'll be learning about toucans or giraffes or lions, but they won't know about the species that's there in their backyard. Of course, because they are tribal kids mostly, they do have connections because they play but they don't have that more focused kind of connection, no, and interactions, guided. The other good thing is that because they're also learning from other people in the community, because many of our team members are from the community, it's a passing on of the knowledge from, some of our nest protectors who are part of the team. So they get to learn and interact with our field team members. It's not only from us that they learn, right? So, yeah.
It's very encouraging to hear the younger generations are getting more and more interested in the conservation work. And
Yeah.
I think our session should end on this positive note.
Okay.
And that's all
Okay.
for
Yeah.
all the time we have for this session. And
Yeah.
I would like to thank Aparajita for all the wonderful insights you have offered for us. And that's the end of this first session. And we will see you in about 30 minutes for the next session of the conference. Thank you
Thank you
again,
so much.
Aparajita. It's
Yeah.
Thank you.
really, really inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.